Yo, yo, yo. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unscripted Intelligence, a podcast where we talk about human intelligence, artificial intelligence, how they intersect, and how they impact everything from education to the workforce.
On this podcast, we interview innovators, thought leaders, and change makers who are making waves and shaking things up. These are live conversations that are uncharted and unfiltered as we make space for what isn't being discussed. And always, always, these conversations are unavoidable. I'm Michelle Ament, the co-president of the Human Intelligence Movement and the chief academic officer of ProSolve. The Human Intelligence Movement is a grassroots nonprofit dedicated to ensuring that we all have those uniquely human skills we need to succeed and thrive in our AI world.
And I'm Arvin, your other co-host. I'm the immersive learning designer and facilitator for the Human Intelligence Movement, as well as the co-founder of ProSolve.
The Human Intelligence Movement is deeply committed to supporting school districts and the workplace to develop these uniquely human skills that we've mentioned that you need to have to be successful in today's world and in the future. And one of the things that we recognize is that school districts develop these skills by having a portrait of a learner or a portrait of a graduate. And this really becomes their North Star or their vision for developing college and career ready students and for really focusing on that whole child.
So it's an honor for us to bring this special series together where we can illuminate and highlight school districts all across California that are doing amazing work just like this. So we'll be talking to school district leaders who are making waves and shaking things up, all while keeping students at the center of everything that they do.
I'm super excited today to have two guests with us, Dr. Jaron Fried and Roman Stearns. Jaron he's the superintendent of Anaheim Union School District, and Roman Stearns is the executive director of Scaling Student Success. Welcome to both of you. I'll give you a minute to introduce yourself and tell us just something about the work that you are doing in Anaheim around your portrait of a learner, your capstone, your 5 C's, and what's making that really impactful. And then Roman, also tell us a little bit about Scaling Student Success. So Jaron, go ahead.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm looking forward to being part of the dialogue this afternoon. For me, again, as the superintendent for Anaheim Union, I've been deeply connected to this work for over more than a decade with our schools as the previous assistant superintendent of ed services. And for us, as we're thinking about our capstone program, which is what we call our portrait of a graduate or student profile, it's really about thinking about how we reimagine and rethink and redesign our schools. I mean, all too often, I think schools are something that's been done to students. We as the adults think we have the answers of what they need. And we've kind of flipped that upside down to think about the world of work and what the world is demanding that our students come into to the world they're going to be inheriting. And so we have adopted, right through the lens of a community school approach, this graduate profile or our capstone program that really prepares students for much more deeper aspects of deeper learning, authentic assessments, and things that are really prepare them for life beyond school. So I'm excited to be a part of that redesign work and just school transformation, right? Making sure school works for them and not the other way around.
That's terrific. I love that. I can't wait to get into this. The redesign, the transformative work. It's very exciting. Roman, tell us about yourself.
I'm Roman Stearns. I'm executive director and founder of Scaling Student Success. We're a statewide partnership. We built a community among all the school districts in California that have a portrait of a learner or graduate profile as a renewed definition of student success, a whole child vision, and all the providers in the field that support them in moving their portraits from poster to practice, fully operationalizing them in a way that makes it a promise to their students, their families, and their community. I'm just delighted and honored to be on the call with Jaron because Anaheim Union High School District is the one district that I hold up most often as the district that is furthest down the road of anyone in the state doing this work. They've been at it for, 8-10 years and just made tremendous progress. The bold visionary leadership has allowed them to move places where other districts have been a little slower to get there. Others are on a journey. The same journey, but just moving a little slower or a shorter period of time.
I love it. I love it. Before we go any further, I feel like our audience needs to know this. So, Jared, you mentioned something. I believe the phrase that you said was oftentimes education is something that schools do to students. Within the first 30 seconds of you speaking, I'm just like, bro, tell us more. Can you give our audience a little more context to how your capstone program is shifting that narrative from schools doing education to students to more so bringing students into the the process? Can you give us more context on how your capstone program accomplishes that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Arvin. And if it's okay, can I give a little more context to kind of how it all came to be? So I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I feel like it's important to give context, because then you'll understand how this is really a community effort, that this is not something that a few of us thought up. It's something our community has helped drive. So really about 8 years ago, we began a visioning process across our schools. And we were realizing we were busy playing a game to try to game the system that so many schools do to get so many kids to do well on a test that doesn't mean anything in terms of what's important in life and what they need to be successful in jobs and careers and just in relationships. And so we were even not the greatest at playing that game. And it felt like we were not being authentic in terms of what was the purpose of school. So imagine our schools in gymnasiums where each school goes through their own process. And in that gymnasium, you have all the teachers for that school, counselors, the classified staff, parents, students, community partners. And in this space, they are grappling with a couple of key essential questions. What is the purpose of K-12 school? What is it that we want students to be able to do when they leave us? What attitudes, qualities, attributes, dispositions do we want them to have? What skills do we want them to possess when they leave? And keep in mind, we're a secondary school district. We serve kids in grades 7 through 12, right? About 25,000 students large. So when we grappled with those questions with our community and with all of our community stakeholders, they didn't ask for test scores. They didn't ask for grades. They were asking for students to be collaborative, to be critical thinkers, to be compassionate leaders, strong communicators. We call them the 5 C's, but these are the skills that the world of work demands. These are the skills that you need to be successful in any relationship. So it gave our board, and at that time our cabinet, cover to begin shifting away from teaching to a test. That was very narrowed and very much something that was gaming. Like, okay, hey, this test asked this many questions on this standard. Let's make sure we spend a couple weeks teaching just this equation. Wasn't engaging, wasn't relevant, wasn't meaningful for students. Yeah. Right? It was how our kids did on one day on one test that really judged how our school was doing. We know our schools were doing so many amazing things. So we began to shift our drivers. We began to focus on a whole child approach that was grounded in those skills, grounded in student voice. The community asked for civic engagement. Students who are out to make the world a better place, right? Taking the issues and topics that they care about and finding solutions to make it better. I know in your intro, you talked a little about AI. We're now leaning into AI and how we help leverage that civic engagement work. But anyways, once we have developed the transition and the shift around our drivers to this whole child approach, right now it became really clear, okay, now that we're shifting our instruction, it's more 5 C's, right? In terms of how we teach the content, right? It's student voice. It's the amplification of purpose and identity work. Now, as we were beginning to do this thing, now we started to ask the question, well, how do we assess how we're doing, right? Because the traditional standardized test doesn't help us assess our students being collaborative, right? Nowhere is that on the SBAC. So we began to develop this graduate profile, or our capstone program, which then asked all of our teachers. So now we have a requirement where every teacher does a minimum of 2 performance task assessments each year in every class. So if I'm a 7th grader who has 7 classes, I'm doing a minimum of 14 performance task assessments that 7th grade year, 28 by the time I leave 8th grade. At the end of every performance task assessment, students have to do a reflection, because we know from John Dewey, you don't learn from the experience, you learn from the reflection on the experience. So students are constantly reflecting in our system, how did this performance task assessment, or we call it a PTA, make me a better collaborator? How did it make me a better communicator? How did it make me a better critical thinker? How did it make me more compassionate? Where did it exercise my creativity skills? And can you imagine if the students are doing all those PTAs and reflecting constantly, that agency and ownership of the learning grows. They start to see the value of those skills. Kids are asking less and less, why do I need to learn that? When they see the value in those skills and they see it connected to things that are happening in their community and in their schools that they want to make better. And so we have completely shifted, and that capstone becomes a way that we authentically assess how our students are progressing, not just with their content, but also with the development of those skills. And so that's how we have really begun to shift over the years our drivers, and now it's become naturalized, normalized, and in the DNA of how we approach school in our district. And again, our community was part of the development of that vision. So it wasn't done by a few people, it was done by the community across our schools. So now we've been given the permission to shift away from those traditional drivers and focus on now the drivers that we know is the true North Star to position our students to do well in life beyond school.
Okay, you just dropped like several thousand rabbit holes that we can go down. One of the things that I feel like I really have to know is when you brought in the community and they gave you their honest responses to these questions, what from their responses differed greatly from what you in your district thought the answers were? Like what did they provide that was very different from what you and your staff had already identified what were important?
It wasn't terribly different. So more context, before we asked those questions, we were engaging and reading some articles together and doing some protocols together. And then those articles, it was, what the future of work is going to demand of their employers. It was a P21 framework, right? The Common Core standards were coming out. So we were reading about the future of schooling. And as we engaged as a community in these different gymnasiums about where the world of work was heading, where schools were heading. And then keep in mind, fast forward a couple of years later, the pandemic hit. And we saw jobs evolving before our eyes, even more so affirming our shift to these drivers. And so those conversations were important as we were reading those articles together before then we engaged in that visioning work. We also did a future protocol. Imagine what our schools, keep in mind in 2018, what do you envision our schools to look like in 2025? What would we see? What would we hear? What do the schedules look like? What opportunities do we see? Well, that became our backwards mapping for what we now have in place. And we just did another future protocol with our site teams and parents for 2030, 2033, right? And so now we're now beginning to build out a backwards map and a plan of how we're gonna get to 2033 based on what the community's asked for. So they're a part of co-constructing and co-establishing, developing our drivers together. Ownership and buy-in are two different concepts. Often you hear people talk about buy-in. I hope you buy into this. Well, that means I'm selling you something, and I hope you get on board. We try to operate very differently in our district, and it's about ownership. When we co-create and work collaboratively together and practice and model the 5 C's as the adults with our students, with our families, right? Now there's a sense of ownership. Now we're all invested into making sure what we have built together is going to work. And when it doesn't, we come back to the table to figure out how we can close those gaps or make improvements into our system. So that is how we've been offering and going about our business, right? We're all about ownership and that co-creation. That shared leadership, that collaborative leadership. We really try not to operate as a top-down construct because that's what buy-in is. It's a top-down construct, right? We try to be flat governance and really collaborative in the way that we've gone about this business. So to answer your question, Arvin, we really didn't get anything drastically different than what we thought. It just now gave us the permission, right, and our board's permission to break away from what we have been doing for years and years and years in this teach to the test, no child left behind model that we all inherited.
Well, I think something you said, Jaron, that I think is key, that ownership piece. But I think that there's something else that you did that I'm hearing, and that is giving permission to stop doing these other things. I think oftentimes school districts will have the same community-based approach, the same ownership, but then they don't release what you stop doing in order to start doing. And now all of a sudden we are having to do twice as many things. And that is really, I think, where some of those initiatives don't launch or take off, because it's asking people to almost do too much. And so, I mean, do you still have to follow state accountability measures and do standardized assessments?
Yes. So and that's a great point, Michelle. So to put our money where our mouth was, we immediately pulled back. We no longer use the interim assessments. We no longer have district benchmarks. So we made it really clear we are moving forward with this whole child approach. And surprise, surprise, our test scores and all, when you compare us to like districts or districts of similar demographics, we're knocking it out of the park. If you look at because we have an articulation agreement with our local community colleges, Cypress and Fullerton College. We have a partnership with UC Irvine and Cal State Fullerton. And because of that, we have a data sharing agreement. Our kids are outperforming and out-persisting compared to kids who live in districts and neighboring districts that are way more affluent, and on paper should be doing better than our students.
Wow.
So we are seeing the proof of our efforts, and it is really affirming the shift and the courage that our board had to listen to our community, right? The equity transformation cycle that Shane Saphir talks about is deeply listening. We took time to deeply listen, and then we took time to reimagine schools based on the voices of our community to then rebuild our systems and our structures to align to that vision that it now informs our approach to teaching and learning. And it's not an overnight process. This has taken us a number of years, but now we're really starting to see the evidence where our students are outperforming at lasting in colleges. We are seeing our students and the quality of what they do in classrooms each and every day are just simply amazing. And so yes, it did take courage for us to let go of the traditional work that we were engaged in, the teaching to a test, the district benchmarks. Our capstone has become kind of the quasi-district benchmark in the way that we assess and progress monitor, but it's teacher generated. We have a deep trust in our professionals. They are hired to be teachers and professionals. We trust them to teach our students the standards. We're a public school. We don't get to ignore the standards, but we give them the permission to do it in a way that integrates the skills that we are after and that amplifies student voice, helping them find their purpose and how they fit in this world.
Okay.
I just want to respond on a number of fronts and kind of double click on so many things that Jaron has said. One is there are most districts at this point are listening to students, and and sometimes that's surveys, sometimes it's focus groups, but they're not really listening in the way that Anaheim has really listened and allowed those voices to drive transformational change in the district. That's just a step forward in a way that most districts haven't really leveraged student voice. To hear that students were bored and disengaged and not feeling like school is relevant for their future, like that's data that was locally identified in Anaheim 8 years ago, but it's exactly consistent with what every single student survey, every single report across California and across the nation is finding, right? Kids are bored, they're disengaged, they don't see learning as relevant in school, that what they're doing is relevant for their future, and they're voting with their feet, and that's leading to chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is not really the problem, it's a symptom of a much deeper and longer standing problem that we're just not serving kids in the way that they need to be served. So the real value and kind of brilliance of what Anaheim has done is just really listened and acted upon students' suggestions and recommendations, and acknowledging that standardized test scores, as Jaron said, are not high stakes. They are absolutely no stakes for students. It doesn't affect their college going opportunities. It doesn't affect their employment opportunities. It doesn't even affect their grades. It affects absolutely nothing at all for students.
Well, it does affect the state seal of civic or seal by literacy. But you're right, Roman. Minimal minimal impact.
In general, they really don't care much, and so it feels like the only thing that the media, mainstream media, and policymakers care about. So there's that huge disconnect, and we have spent literally billions and billions of dollars over decades of time to improve students' test scores and close the achievement gap, and we've seen this much progress, literally this much. Maybe a point in most places. It just, why we continue to throw good money after bad is a huge question to ask. And so Anaheim has asked that question seriously. And there's not again, as he said, not abandoning test scores, but finding that to engage students in their learning, to make schooling more relevant, they're going to get better results because kids are going to show up. Yeah. And if they show up, they're going to do better, as opposed to kind of being chronically absent, which happens in so many other districts. And then the last thing I would say is, and outperforming happens for the same reason. It makes sense that students are outperforming. A term I heard once from a colleague in Porterville out in Central Valley is that we're in the process, and this goes back to Jaron's comment about not just buy-in, but ownership. She said, we're trying to convert our stakeholders to stockholders. And I just thought that was a really nice term, stockholders being owners, and so if that's the process for every district, and every district saw it in that way, the way Anaheim and Porterville does, then we would act differently.
Okay, I guys, I am struggling because I'm taking so many notes from what you're saying. Michelle, I don't know if this is just, I'm just so out of these kind of conversations, but This sounds so revolutionary and so groundbreaking. I almost want to shift this episode into how do we get your two brilliances to more so communicate to the audience that's going to be watching this podcast the importance and the steps, the yellow brick road to how to create the same kind of success and outperforming in their districts on every level. I don't know if we have enough time to do that remaining this episode. I'm seeing from the book.
I think you're talking about, it's one thing to have a North Star, to have this portrait, and then it's another to make it be a practice.
Reality.
And you've talked about the listening sessions, the student voice, and all of that. People do that, but what about your approach is different than what typically happens? Can you start to identify some nuggets for us?
So, we're now in our capstone season where every single student in the 8th grade who's going to be going to the 9th grade and our seniors who are graduating, they do a capstone showcase where they now get to walk a panel through their journey. Mm-hmm. And they bring evidence, which are the artifacts or the PTAs that show exemplaries of how they are collaborators, communicators, whatnot. We have a learning management system, eCadence, that is where students house their PTAs, right, in their capstone. They get to take that with them. So imagine now our kids go into a job interview and they tell their future employer, I am a collaborator. Here's evidence. Here's all the PTAs that I've done that show examples of how I collaborate with my peers. Here's how it shows evidence of my critical thinking. Students really get to own their work, right? In those capstone showcases, we bring parents, we bring community partners into these showcases across our schools. Our whole ed staff and district office dynamo, they get to sign up for capstones across our schools, so they get to reinforce and see the work that they're supporting from behind the scenes. And so as a community, as an Anaheim Union community, we all get to be part and celebrate our seniors and our 8th graders as they go through this. Our underclassmen get to see and experience the capstones, right? So they know what they're working towards. So they see firsthand how education is working for them, that our core values and our vision, mission, core values that I just talked about are delivered primarily through instruction. It's not something they get after school in a cool program or club that we bring on. It happens during the school day. Dual enrollment. We have dual enrollment. We have Google certifications. We're the first public school district in the country where our kids earn Google certifications in their classes, right? They're doing this during the school day because athletes don't have access to that if it's after school. Kids who live in poverty that need to watch their younger siblings don't have access to that if it's after school. So our charge is, what can we do during the school day to really transform and flip education so it's really working for our kids? And so that is all different, but it's also the work that we've done with professional learning to build capacity with our teachers to think differently about how they approach instruction. Our union, they're on board with us. We have been working with our union because teachers feel liberated. They got hired to teach kids, not just stuff. And so now they're teaching students to this whole child. They feel like teacher creativity unleashes student creativity. So the unions have been really supportive, and we've been able to integrate PTAs into our evaluation contract language. So there's an alignment with us, and this is all aligned to the community school approach, right? Where it takes the village to really raise our children and help our children be successful. And so it's been this all hands on deck where you can't hide in our district. We're every department chair meeting, every principal meeting, assistant principal meetings, our LCAP process, local control and accountability, it is all focused on the same thing. So no matter what meeting you're a part of, and if you're part of both meetings, it's the same kind of message, and it intertwines constantly. And so as Roman said earlier, that post-sort of practice, you can't hide. We're moving towards practice. And there's a lot of accountability systems, and accountability is not a bad word, but there's a lot of accountability systems to make sure we're moving in that direction. And we're constantly investing in our people. The community school grant, when it came forward, people bought all kinds of shiny things, brought consultants in. That's great, but what's sustainable with that? We invested our money in people, and we invested our money in professional learning. So when that money goes, we're okay. Right? We've built capacity in our people so these systems last, and the people who are in charge of these systems last. So if one person leaves, we're okay. Right? Our superintendent can retire. Our system is just fine. Right? So that's the idea.
Yeah, it's the term collective efficacy is coming up for me, and trust, this ability to trust teachers. So to set the expectation, know where we're headed, and then get out of the way and allow them to do their best work and be efficacious in that. Really, that's what I'm thinking about. Roman, what would you?
I think I would synthesize all that Jaron just said and kind of bubble it up to two key points in terms of how they've been able to achieve this. One is that they've normalized experimentation and risk taking. Like that's okay. And they've just like, that's okay for the superintendent to model it and should be, you know, and it's okay for teachers. It's okay for others, like all staff, to just be taking risks, experimenting, trying new things, knowing that we have a North Star, we have this whole child vision and we're moving towards it, and it's messy work, but we're going to do it anyway, you know? The second thing is that very, you know, maybe taken for granted perhaps in Anaheim, but very real for the school districts that have superintendents that are new to their job, you know, first year, second year. It takes some time for superintendents to build trust with their board and build trust with community and build trust with staff. Anaheim's been privileged to have leadership with a long enough tenure to be willing to and able to stretch out their neck and take risks in a way that might lead to, you know, when you stretch out your neck, it's easier to cut it off. And, you know, boards do that for first and second year superintendents if they kind of stretch out their necks too soon. But in the case of Jaron and Mike Matsuda, like they've been there, they'd proven their commitment and built relationships in a way that allowed them to take the risks that they need to in order to move the system forward faster than many other districts are able to do it.
Wow. Well, and I think results matter, right? So the fact that I am sure you have a lot of evidence, and you've spoken to some of this, that you have those standardized test scores are high, the students are being successful in college. There, you probably have some data that says they are getting employed, they have careers, they're sustaining. And so when you have proof that what you're doing works, then that just reinforces that cycle that this matters and that it is serving kids as you want it to do. So wow, kudos to you and because I know, like, you talk about this with such ease, Jaron, like we just did this, and then we gathered in these gyms, and then we did professional development. And I know that the work to get where you are today was not easy. And I'm sure there were roadblocks and challenges along the way. But I'd echo what you said, Roman, about being willing to take a risk, being willing to do something that maybe hadn't been done before and forge a pathway forward. Is commendable. So do you find like you are, do you find that other people want to come and observe and see this work in action? Like how are you able to share what you've done other than be on this podcast?
Yeah, so we're a deep dive district for the state of California. We're one of 3 districts that have been recognized by the state for a community school. And so almost every month we host leading and learning visits where, matter of fact, one's tomorrow. We have about 120 educators from up and down the state, sometimes across the country, coming to visit us to learn about our approach and learn about our story and the entry points by which we made this happen, because every district is doing good work, arguably. And so as we think about the different entry points, they assess where they kind of are so they can take back their experience with us over the day or 2 days to then think about where their next steps may be. The key is, how many of us go to professional learning, but then what happens on Monday, right? So we want to make sure that we're setting up our colleagues and our friends across the state or across the country for success. And to go back to the work we've done with Roman Stearns and the scaling student success, for us, that's been beneficial. Even though I think I agree, when we go to conferences and things across the country, I think we're reminded constantly that we're out in front in many, many ways. But there are other districts who are very much like us in their forward thinking. And so for us to be around other forward-thinking educators and colleagues who push our thinkings, ask us difficult questions, who are also trying to do their own school transformation, that's been invaluable. For us, we all have our internal colleagues that I am blessed. I have such an amazing group of people that I get to work with, but we're constantly around each other, pushing each other. But when you can get with colleagues in Cajon or in Davis or other parts of the state that are also doing forward-thinking work, it's refreshing to think about what they're going through, the challenges they're faced with, but what they're thinking about and how they want to disrupt the status quo. And so for us, that's been valuable, right? To be with other people who push our thinking and get us to think about things that maybe we don't see because we're just in it. It's like the weightlifter who's look in the mirror. How come I'm not getting bigger? But someone who comes and sees you every once in a while, like, wow, you've been working out. We want to be with people who can look and give us honest feedback with what we're doing well, but then look at us with a critical lens and give us feedback that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that, that's where these consortiums have been super beneficial for us.
Right.
So we're always interested in connecting with like-minded folks who push our thinking and are willing to disrupt the status quo and think about really the world that our students are entering, not the world that we grew up in, because it's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, AI is, all these things are coming in, and if we continue doing what we've always done, shame on us, we're setting our kids up for failure, especially when we serve kids first from opportunity. We're creating even more gaps or widening the inequities for our students. And so shame on us. The responsibility is upon us to think and just act differently.
Okay, I have to hop in here and say just a couple of things, and I don't know how much time we have left because I'm not paying attention to the chat that's going on. I'm so locked in. Michelle, well, two parts. One, I would love it if we could possibly get like a one pager or like some sort of data sheet that shows all of the increase in progress, all of the results that you all have seen from whatever perspective, right, or data that you have, that we could post alongside this episode that would help validate this conversation. Because I'm imagining that our viewers are going to look at this episode and say, there's no way that this is real. There's no way that this is true. So anything that we can get like that, Michelle, I would love to just add it to like a link in the video, whether it's
we have Arvin. We do have so we did a study tour to Anaheim about 3 years ago, and that's a little outdated now. You guys have done a lot of work since then, but it's about a 10-page case study that captures the work they had done up to that point. And already up to that point, they had done a whole lot more than other districts had done. So it's still visionary, and it kind of helps inspire possibilities for folks who read it. Jaron, do you have anything newer?
Yeah, so we have updated data points. I'm sure I can put something together, but all 20 of our schools are California democracy schools. And I know the state seal of civic engagement is something that's is being considered for the dashboard. And if you think about the sophistication of what that means every single student in our district is involved in a civic action project. And it's not just doing the research about a topic or issue, but it's a call to action. Right, so we have 25,000 students, whether they have an IEP, whether they're a plurilingual student, whether they're in honors or just a regular kid, right? They're all touching civic action projects. And so, matter of fact, tomorrow night we have our soapbox finals, where we have TED Talks or soapboxes across all of our schools, where you're going to see conversations around immigration, around human trafficking, around what's happening in Gaza and in the Middle East. All things that our kids care about, and our teachers, through the professional learning, find ways to connect it to their content and build these skills in our students so they're positioned to do their research, take a position, back it up with evidence, and then come up with a claim, and then find next steps on how we as a community can make or help address that to make it a little bit better. And so, yeah, we have all kinds of data points that I could share, both traditional and even non-traditional.
So it makes it obvious why we've chosen Anaheim Union High School District to be a keynoter during our summit in September. We're going to launch the event with a why speaker, which is Travis Allen, kind of talking about where we are and like moving towards the next era of why we need to move towards durable skills or human skills. But then we move to a how story, and that was the story of Anaheim and all the progress they've made, and bringing those human skills to life for every student every day in every school. And then we may get Linda Darling-Hammond. We're still hoping to get her to come in and do a how kind of statewide, like how the state is moving this agenda forward. And then we end the summit with the call to action, which is a student panel and a business panel. Like those two audiences, just celebrating how important this work is, and why everybody in attendance at the summit should continue working hard to move it forward, and why it matters. So we're excited about the summit coming up in September, and excited about Anaheim's role in that journey.
I love it. I love it. I love it. As we wrap this up, I really want to give both of you, actually all three of you, you too, Michelle, an opportunity to kind of share with the audience an unavoidable truth. So think about this as a moment where I want you to summarize your experience from your career and the work that you're doing, or the work that you've seen done, with some sort of challenge or inspiration or final thoughts that you would share to anybody that's listening to this episode and saying, there's no way that this is real. This is incredible. They're wrapped in. You're talking to 2,000 people in an auditorium, and this is your last like 30 seconds. What would you say to them? what is the unavoidable truth that you would share with them and leave them with as you walk off the stage?
I can go first. And Jaron said it at the beginning. We need to really, really, really listen to students' voices. Like, ask them all the right questions and really listen and act accordingly. If we don't, we're going to lose them all. Like, not all, but we will lose a large, we already have lost a large percentage. Kids have the answers. You know, they know exactly what they need. They have a vision for their future, a vision that we could never see. You know, and that's why actually we're involved with some student organizations to create a vision for California education by students for students. And we have a bill that is being introduced this week that would require the State Department of Ed and State Board of Ed to create a vision for California education. And we intend to bring that student vision into that equation of informing the language that the adults come up with. But we just really need to listen to kids.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, you know, I have a friend who I agree, Ruben. I think not to get political here, but our country's at a critical juncture right now, and our democracy is at threat, right? And so, if not us, who? And I think the unavoidable truth is our kids aren't apathetic; they're often uninvited. And so, when we can invite them to the space, along with our parents and our community members, to really share what's on their mind, and Shane Saphir talks about her equity transformation cycle, we need to listen deeply, and then as we listen, we need to uncover what is it that we're hearing, right? Not listening to respond, but really listening to understand. And then once we uncover the trends, patterns, themes of what we're hearing, then we can begin to reimagine. And then as we reimagine, redesign, and think about our schools, then it calls us to move, right? Do something to make whatever you uncovered and reimagined better. And that cycle is constantly back and forth, and just continue that work, build systems and structures that support the vision, and then have that constantly inform the approach to teaching and learning. And that's part of the cycle. And success breeds success. As you start to do it, more and more people get excited. You see discipline rates go down. You see attendance go up. You see all the indicators that you would be looking for normally start to improve, where kids start to feel seen, valued, and heard on a campus. They feel like education is something that is for them, not something that's being done to them. And change is hard, and you got to be able to roll up your sleeves and work through it. And it is not easy. And I'll be the first to tell you, despite all the successes that I just shared with you, we are nowhere near where we need to be. Like, we still have work to be done, and really, honestly, the growth mindset, you should never be done, right? You're always working. But I'm really, really proud of where we are. But I would be the first to tell you, we're not done. We still have way more to do and way more to push and challenge. And but the kids, the answers are in the room. As cliche as that sounds, that they are. And again, going back to ownership, when you activate their voices and amplify it, they're going to be the first to lead the way, because they know the world that they're inheriting is not clean. It's kind of messy. And so they want to be positioned to create the world that they want. And so we need to create the space for that to happen.
Okay. I love it. These are such good final thoughts. I feel inspired to hop in here. So I'm going to go with mine that I'm just now piecing together in my head, and then I'll toss it to you, Michelle. My unavoidable truth from this episode is going to be something that the both of you said so clearly, and it's kind of been a common theme, which is that prior to now, education has been something that schools have done to students, as opposed to something that we've created or done with students. And I think that the unavoidable truth is that we are now in a space and a place where this concept of getting students to buy in is proven to be ineffective. We're at a space where we now need to shift, like you said, from students buying into education to students having ownership in education. To me, that right there summarizes a truth that has been popping up left and right. No matter what the tech advances or the new shiny tool or the new fun thing is, none of it's worked. None of it's worked. And I think we're seeing now that the reason why is because we're doing the same thing. We're trying to get buy-in as opposed to ownership. That's my unavoidable truth.
Well, I will round things out by talking a little bit about buy-in and ownership as well, because I think as leaders, we all know the steps to get buy-in, but what true leadership means is to get ownership of the goal and of the focus, the North Star, whatever you are working with. And I think you do that by not having all the answers, by being willing to take risks, by being willing to try something different, and by being willing to trust the people around you. And I think so often in leadership, as in education, the work has been about just getting the buy-in and convincing people to believe what you believe, not shifting the ownership and then stepping back and getting out of the way. So I think that would be my unavoidable truth, is just really leading with ownership.
I love it. I love it. I cannot wait